Okay, good evening. I'm Councillor Spencer Farmer and welcome to the August Overview and Scrutiny Committee. As usual, if I could ask the lead officer to start with the fire evacuation procedures.
Certainly, thank you, Chairman. We're not expecting a drill this evening, so if the alarm sounds, it's for real. If it does, please leave the building at once via the nearest available exit. Escape routes are indicated by arrows on the green signs. Please don't use the lifts. If you have difficulty negotiating the stairs, make yourself known to one of the officers here. We will assist. When clear of the building, proceed to the assembly point on the views meadow where we'll take a roll call, and please do not re-enter the building until told to do so by the officer in charge. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. And can I remind everyone that this meeting will or is being recorded and that anyone remaining at the meeting has consented to any such recording. Moving on, we'll start with item 1, the minutes of the previous meeting. Are there any points of accuracy from the minutes? Councillor Brown.
There was just one that I picked up, which was I'm down as being on the service panel for community for Q4, which I wasn't on ONS. So that's, I think it's
would have been challenging then.
Yeah, it would have been challenging. I think it's would have been Councillor Bailey, and I think the copy of the minutes that you've got to sign has been updated. So.
Okay, thank you. Any other points of accuracy? I don't think there were any matters arising on those minutes. So can I have a proposal, please, to accept those minutes? Councillor Butler and a seconder. Councillor Jones. All those in favour? Thank you. Okay, moving on. Do we have any apologies or absence, please?
Thank you, Chair. We have apologies from Councillor Bailey, and he is being substituted by Councillor Drage. We also have apologies from Councillor Beattie, Councillor Hale, Councillor Taylor, and that's it.
Okay, thank you very much, and welcome, Councillor Drage. Thank you. Okay, declarations of interest. Do we have any declarations of interest at this stage? Councillor Forster.
Thank you, Chair. With the waste item on the agenda, I declare I'm a Hampshire County Councillor and Cabinet Member, non-prejudicial and non-pecuniary.
Thank you, Councillor Forster. Any others? No. Excellent. Not really any chair's announcements tonight, except that there is one of these in front of you, which is to make life easier when we get to the work programme, just highlight some additions and some dates which weren't on the previous work programme, but we'll get to that when we get to the overview and scrutiny work programme, just so everyone can see what's being proposed and make it a bit clearer. Participation, I'm assuming there is nothing submitted. Okay, thank you. Which brings us nicely to Q1 budget monitoring report. And we have Joanne Rain and Graham Clark here. Jo, I think you're presenting this.
I am. And once again, beautiful photograph of the Park District, taken at the field at the top of Fleet Pond. It probably has a name, but I'm here to present Q1 capital and revenue forecast outturn. Q1 is the hardest one to accurately predict for the full year because we're only looking at 3 months worth of data, and it's the view is quite simple at this stage. So in summary, we are forecasting a 0.6 million surplus as compared to the net budget of 15.3 million. That's the revenue. And for capital, 11.8 million against a budget of 13.2 million. There are breakdowns of this further on in this presentation and a detailed breakdown in the tables. For capital, it is mainly timing differences, and that is explained in the tables. Just a reminder of what overview and scrutiny are here to do. There is something to consider at the end some community projects from earmarked reserves, and I've got Kirsty online to answer any questions. I'm going to skip to my favourite slide. Nice, there we go. Is everybody familiar with waterfall charts? I was asked this at the beginning of every financial year. Yeah. So I said before that the forecast outturn at this stage is 0.6 million surplus. And you can see there are two large green squares. The largest is the Treasury, 434,000 surplus, or more than we said we were going to earn in the budget. This is due to the unrest in the Middle East, which put a halt to the interest rate decrease predictions that our advisors were giving us. So instead of dropping down slowly to around 3%, it's still holding up around 4.5%. And when you have the amount of reserves that we have to invest, that makes a significant difference. I was asked earlier today is it a conservative approach? What I do is I've got two models which look at interest. A lot of the interest is already banked because we've got investments, and that is on the final slide of this deck. You can see the investments, but I look at what we've got and what we could potentially to get from our surplus cash, and then I also look at a trend model based on previous years and how our investments flux up and down, and then I meet them in the middle to try and give it as most accurate forecast as possible. The other green blob is income, and part of that income is offset by supplies and services. So if we get an additional grant, for example, Ukrainian families, we get an additional grant, then that should be, in theory, offset in supplies and services. Where we do have upside in income, and I've got Ashley here to nod when I say we've got an increase in garden waste subscribers, an increase in replacement bins. I think the bins are getting towards the end of their useful life, and so we're seeing sort of more orders for them, and that makes up most of the income, which is a surplus. The others is offset by supplies and services. I'll pause there. Are there any questions on?
Councillor Smith,
if the bins are end of life because of their end of their design life, is it still required that the residents actually purchase those then?
I stick mine together with a bit of duct tape, to be honest.
Well, I have seen a lot like that. I just wondered what the actual contractual sort of status was, if they really are end of life and the materials deteriorating.
Do we have a policy?
I'm happy to.
Ashley, would you like to have a go at answering that?
So wheel bins have a lifespan of 7 to 10 years. So it depends on the point at which the original wheel bin was purchased by the resident. Now, we know that a lot of our waste bins actually far outlive the 7 to 10 year lifespan, and we still have some wheel bins across the district that are dated 1996 or even potentially before then. So they do last a very long time, but it depends on how they're treated. If the amount of weight of the material that goes in there consistently is quite significant. If parents get their toddler to jump up and down to compact waste down, that can compact the material and result in a crack down the side. If they are stored in the direct sunlight, for example, or in back gardens where they're kind of quite exposed. So those temperature extremes throughout the year, that kind of constant heating in the summer and the cooling during the winter, it makes the plastic within the containers more brittle over time. So they are manufactured with an anti-UV agent within the plastic, but obviously that's only going to last so long. And over time, you'll generally see some of the older waste bins, they kind of almost turn like a milky grey colour. So when you see a milky grey wheel bin, you know that that's probably one from 1989 or 1990, part of kind of the original first deployment. So yeah, it's probably cyclical, and what we'll probably find now is that we'll go through a phase where lots of bins are replaced, and then we might kind of drop off a little bit, and then that kind of cycle will just carry on. So I think we're probably at that point now where maybe there was a point at some point sort of 10 years or so ago where maybe there was a large development, lots of people ordered bins, and now kind of those containers are kind of coming to the end of their usable life. To go back to Joe's point, yes, residents, if they do have a crack in the bin, I have seen quite a few that have been gaffer taped up. It can extend that usable service life for a year or two, but eventually it is going to fail, and to the point where maybe the lid might crack, which then it's just not safe to load onto the collection vehicle. So yeah, it could be a whole different host of reasons why those bins last 7 years, 10 years, 20 years in some of these examples.
Councillor Smith, did that answer your question?
Doesn't really answer the question about whether they're required to actually pay for the replacement if it's actually at the end of what would be the expected life of the bin. You know.
Okay. Sorry, Councillor Forster.
Sir, if I can help, if I remember rightly, our policy says that if they are damaged during the first 5 years by handling by our collection operatives, then they'll be replaced at the council's cost. After that, it's completely down to the resident. I think 5 years is accurate. I might be wrong on that. It might only be 3.
Yeah, either 3 or 5 from memory, Councillor Forster. Yes, you're correct. Those costs. So wheeled bins have a kind of a manufacturer's guarantee normally of around 7, maybe 10 years, depending on which supplier you use. So where bins fail within the first few years, 3-5 years, it could be attributable to a manufacturing defect, or it could be the result of mishandling from the collection crew. If it's not loaded properly, the teeth on the bin clamp might chew through the plastic because they have to sit on the clamp quite specifically. And it might also be that on occasion the bin gets lifted. If it's not secured properly by the bin clamp, it might fall into the back of the vehicle hopper, at which point it's not safe to retrieve and it has to be crushed. Those types of incident where they are damaged or they're lost during the collection cycle are down to Serco as our contractor to replace, so the cost is on them.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions at this stage? If not, I have one, but I'll give other people a chance first. Just one question. You mentioned that part of the 569 upside underspend, however we want to phrase it, was grants received. Are those grants received for things that are in the budget this year? For example, they're offsetting a cost, or will we potentially run down those grants through this year, which means that will detract from the 569?
If they're in this report, then they weren't budgeted for. But if we have received them as a grant, they will be spent. They might not be spent, that their spend might not be reflected in this budget yet because the plan to spend them hasn't materialised yet.
So it could stay the same, it could reduce if we spend the money?
Yes.
Thank you. Any further questions? No, please continue.
Okay, I'm now going to move on to the community grants. Not community grants, a proposed use of reserves, which have been identified by the Community Directorate. They are listed here in summary, but there is a detailed breakdown in the appendices explaining exactly what these grants will do. So if you have a look and if you've got any questions.
Councillor Forster.
I think I've skipped the page. Did I miss it? The LGR spend update?
I can come back to that if you want me to.
Yeah, because I've got a question on that.
Okay, if you want to deal with that one now, then.
Thank you. My question is that the report notes a 1.2 million with a further request for $1 million. How does that compare against the original, not forecast, the original estimate we gave of costs of LGR in our proposition to government when we were forecasting costs of the benefits of LGR.
So, Chairman, I think, Councillor Foster, you're referring to, there was a KPMG report that was presented, and then that formed the basis of the business case that was submitted. Yeah, for most district and borough councils at least, and there was a very large number in there. I think the transition cost pre-vesting day was about £80 million, and post-vesting day was some transformation and sort of right-sizing one-off costs. And then there was a payback of somewhere between 3 and 5 years that was forecast in there. So our 1.2 million that was approved by council earlier this year is for the costs, the direct costs for Hart District Council. And that could be backfilling people who are spending time on LGR. So if we take Steve Bennett, for example, he's spending a lot of his time, so we're backfilling him. So there's a cost for that in here. And then as we go through next year, we will be incurring further costs, staff, systems, contracts, etc., just here. But the one of the costs that you're referring to, Councillor Foster, is the sort of collective cost across all of the councils, and some of that will be apportioned to existing councils. So we're anticipating some of that coming down the line to Hart, and that's why at the next cabinet meeting we'll be asking, in fact it's going to go to full council, for an additional £1 million to be set aside from reserves to top that up. Now it's very difficult to estimate that with accuracy at this point, but it's consistent with what a lot of the districts and boroughs are doing.
Thank you. I appreciate it might be consistent, but in terms of our forecast, the numbers that we put forward, you've got 2.2 million here, £1 million increase. How does that compare what we expected at this point?
So that £80 million wasn't broken down per council at that point. There's no comparability I can give you, because that was KPMG's view from their experience in other local government reorganisations of what the transition costs are likely to be across the whole of Hampshire. So it was one figure in there. It wasn't broken down. It wasn't the sum of lots of individual councils' estimates. I've got nothing to compare our 1.2 and our million to in relation to that number that went forward.
Okay, so we've got £1 million excess at the moment, which we're now putting into the budget, which wasn't forecast. Is that right?
That's correct, because we're learning more as we go. And we said this in council in February, that the initial £1 million was needed to incur costs now, but we anticipated that as we, firstly at that point, when we set the budget in February, of course, the government was still in the process of confirming LGR, which they did earlier this year. But, you know, as each month goes by and we're working with all of the other councils, so Hampshire and all the other district and boroughs and the other unitaries, we're getting a better idea of the total likely cost of it. And so we're prudently setting aside, or recommending that we set aside another £1 million now at this stage, and then we'll keep that under review, and we'll keep the monitoring, and as Joe's put in here, this table of what costs we're actually incurring.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thanks for taking that question. Councillor Thomas.
Is now the time to ask questions around the community reserves proposals?
Yeah, I was about to say we'll go back to the community reserve.
Yeah.
Carry on,
Right.
Councillor.
Okay.
Here's our community reserves.
Yeah, so I just wondered, are these just proposals at the moment, or are they planned to happen? So I couldn't see any kind of assessment criteria or anything. That it just seemed that these are things a team would like to do. So I don't know if they've got to then go through a formal process, or are these?
This is the formal process. You can scrutinise it, and then it goes to cabinet.
Has there been any criteria to assess them?
Kirsty, would you like to take the floor?
Good evening, Kirsty.
Hi, yeah, thanks very much. I'm really happy to answer that one. Just by way of background, I was asked by cabinet members at the end of last year to map some spending plans for the reserves that we had, which were earmarked for specific purposes. So that went in the service plan for this financial year. So what the team and I have been doing is looking to see what projects would be feasible for us to deliver. So what you've got here is a range of projects which are pretty much in most of the service areas within the community directorate. And these are projects that are feasible to move forward either this year or next financial year. So it's probably easier to look at the table at the back because it's got a little bit more detail on, but I'm happy to take any questions on any specific projects that you might be interested in.
I suppose in the absence of that criteria, I suppose some of the ones that jumped out to me were number 3, it says a permanent wellbeing trial. I don't know if it's permanent or it is a trial. Trial. Oh, it says trial. Oh, I thought it was a trial. Is it because it said trial? Okay, that makes sense. But I wasn't quite sure whether, how do we assess that's going to have any benefits? I mean, there was a garden at RAF Odium, and I wasn't quite sure if that was something that'd be more the responsibility of RAF Odium. I was just trying to understand how these things have been assessed.
To answer that, they haven't really been assessed as such, because these aren't bids that are being put forward. These are projects that are being brought forward by the team, either that they've perhaps had on the back burner, or things like the RAF Odium garden is a good example. That piggybacks on the work that we did with the military community in Odium last year, and a request came forward for that. So that's sort of an oven-ready project, if you like. So there's no assessment criteria. These are just proposals that have come up from the team that are deliverable. They're not bids for funding as such. They'll be delivered by us or outsourced with the with the funding, for example, the projects to third-party organisations.
I won't labour the point, but I suppose from my perspective, just personally, it feels like at the very least there should be some sort of value for money assessment or something to understand whether this is money spent. I suppose in the absence of that criteria, it just feels if we're just picking things to spend money on because maybe someone's reached out to us, or it feels a little, I don't know, I can't think of a better way to describe this. I don't mean it this way, but a bit weak in terms of actually the process being robust.
Well, we are being asked to make comments to Cabinet, and that therefore is a comment, and it's a reasonable comment. So it could be noted.
So 3 years or whatever, value for money would be a good way to look at it, wouldn't it?
Yeah, certainly. And I mean, where this goes next is to Cabinet to make these decisions, and Cabinet asked for it to come via Roving Scrutiny so that they can get your views. And just a quick process point, Chairman, if I may, that's relevant. Our reserves are split into sort of 3 groups. One is to support our medium-term financial strategy. One is a group of specific reserves that are earmarked either due to the source of the funding that we've had in, or locally sort of self-imposed restrictions by the council. And then we've got some other reserves that meet sort of certain risks and things. And what we've said in the budget report in February, and indeed the year before, is that that middle group of reserves are available for bids from officers for projects and schemes that can come forward. So normally they would come through in January and February as part of the budget process. But now this is sort of a mid-year request. So I completely understand what you mean about the value for money, and I think that's a very good question, a very good point to pass through to Cabinet.
Thank you. Councillor Butler.
Thank you. One positive comment for me, or thought for me, is the number of schemes here that involve mental health and well-being, because we know that there are, a lot of swathes of the population that have issues. So very positive. Firstly, can I just ask about the first item on that list? Is the biggest one, the Homes for Ukraine? That money, what's it going to be spent on? Is it going to be partly staffing? Is it going to be actual money that goes to help families? Can you tell me how the money would be spent? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Butler. As I say, the appendix does give a little bit more detail, but the plan with the Ukrainian money is we have a fair amount in our reserves. We have a member of the team, somebody who works for me, who supports our Ukrainian households, but we're finding that Citizens Advice and Heart Voluntary Action are very heavily involved in supporting Ukrainian families still. And so we wanted to allocate some of the reserve that we have to those two organisations, which would be 100k each. Just by way of background, we've still got 28 families living with sponsors. So those people that originally took people in for 6 months when the scheme was set up. We've still got families arriving. We have 4 new arrivals in the last month. And since 2023, we've had 83 families move out of those hosted situations into the private rented sector. So still quite a big cohort. We don't see that much about it, but there is a lot of work that goes on in the background. And the work that HVA and Citizens Advice are doing for us is really detailed and complex. So, for example, sorting out school and nursery placements, they're dealing with transport, there's a lot of passport and visa application issues that they're actively involved in at the moment, dealing with bills, underpayments, that sort of stuff. So really sort of detailed, complex one-to-one work that is taking up quite a lot of time over and above the time that Di in my team would have to do that. So that's why you see that proposal here.
Thank you.
And Kirsty, just to clarify, the money coming from earmarked reserves for Homes for Ukraine, presumably that was originally funding that we received that has gone into reserves because we haven't previously spent it. Would that be correct?
That's correct. That funding comes from central government via Hampshire County. Yeah, and it continues to come in because we still have these families to support.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Drage.
Thanks. Kirsty, this is all amazing and really great schemes and everything like that we're getting involved with. But there's 2 things that I've got, and one is I'm going to back up Councillor Thomas here. I don't know how they're you know, they make your heart sing and they're all well-being and stuff like that, but what is the criteria for us doing these schemes? And then I guess on the back of that one, we're a big district, right? So is there a spread throughout the district, or is it mainly you know, focused around certain areas, etc., etc.? But then secondly, so that's my first question. Secondly, there's a lot of the environment stuff which is amazing, but have we brought on board our environment team with that, and are they aware so that it can be then put into our climate change action plan maybe, and just linking things up? That's all I'm thinking about. So can you remember the first one?
I can. Thank you very much, Councillor Drage. Yes, I'll try and answer those. I mean, I think you can see a reasonable spread throughout the district, and a number of these projects are projects that will affect all residents, for example. So the work in the community safety work in schools, for example, is across the whole of the district. The outreach worker obviously will affect all residents. So whilst some of them have got a very sort of geographical base, like the wellbeing trails, most of the other projects are will impact across the district, I think. Your second question was, there is a lot of wellbeing. There are a number of wellbeing projects on here, and much of the money that was in reserves came from COVID and was focused on getting people outside, mindfulness, sort of that sort of wellbeing type focus. And the projects that you see there from the countryside team, which obviously now sits within my service area, have actually come up through the service themselves. So they're very aware of these, and really they're keen. Particularly one of those, the sculpture trail, the small sculpture trail, for example. You know, they've had ready to go, but not had the opportunity to find funding up until now. So the team would be thrilled to be able to deliver some of these projects they've had in their back pocket.
That's great news, because number one, you basically, what I was trying to get at is the subject matter experts, for want of a better phrase, are the ones that are feeding into this and are telling us we should be doing this, which is fantastic, which should be, to again Councillor Thomas's point, one of the criteria, rather than us just, you know, finger in the air. We're getting the actual knowledge from the subject matter experts. And number two, I like what you said about it will help a lot of residents, because that could be a metric. You know, how many people are going to benefit from this, what we're putting in? Just obviously a guesstimate, but that could be a way to decide some of the things. I'm just trying to, I love it, but I'm just trying to put some stuff around it, you know, so we can justify it a little bit more. That's all.
Point taken. I think it's the same point, pretty much the same point that Councillor Thomas is making. Councillor Forster.
Thank you, Chair. Just two questions. The first one is on the Bramshot Farm large sculpture trail. See, that source of funding for that is Homes from Ukraine. Can you please explain how Homes for Ukraine, rather than going on household support, is going on some sculptures at Bramshot?
I think there's a simple explanation for this.
It's a deliberate mistake, and you spotted it. But if you look on the screen, yeah, it's been corrected.
I think it's a typo. It's correct on the tables at the back, but it has been corrected. But good spot.
Is it up there?
I think it is the post-COVID community recovery. It's meant to be.
And in your table, Ukrainian families is spelt incorrectly.
But you're right to highlight it. It is an error on the document.
I should have said at the start.
Your second question, Councillor.
The second question is, can someone confirm what proportion of the £568,000 is actually going on officer salaries?
I can, Joe, you may be able to help me out with this. I'm just, I actually don't think that any of these projects are for officer salaries. The only staffing projects will be ones which will be run by third parties, so Citizens Advice and Heart Voluntary Action. Pretty sure that's correct. It's for things rather than staffing resources. We've got the staffing resources in place to deliver these.
Yeah, that is correct. Very, very little of it. In fact, you see the second one up. I think there's an intention from the bottom, sorry, which is the Heart Community Garden. There's intention to get some additional staffing, but in terms of existing staffing, I think Kirsty, you're intending to resource this over the next 20 months from your project officers, aren't you, mainly, that are already on the payroll?
Yes, that's correct. And just on that Heart Community Garden, the current cohort of staff who run that garden, their funding ends, and this is top-up funding to keep that going and to take them through to LGR.
Councillor Forster.
Yeah, no, that's helpful. And so for clarity, the 200k for Ukrainian families, or Ukrainian, will actually go to the Ukrainian families. It won't go on any heart officers.
It's going to HVA.
Yeah, it won't go to heart officers, but it will be money that is granted to Citizens Advice and HVA to deliver those services through either their paid staff or their volunteers. I'm not anticipating that they would recruit additional staff. It is for to support that effort, if you like.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Brown.
I just had 4 kind of, I suppose, detailed questions rather than, so I'll run through them. And so one was just a question of whether I'm looking at the appendix document, I just wondered whether there was any reason for the order that the projects are listed in. Just when I was looking at it, I was jumping around between where they came from a reserve, which is one of the things I was looking at. So I just wondered if there was a reason why they were ordered in a particular order. Just again, it was sort of terminology, just wanting to check if there was a difference between community recovery fund and recovery fund and post-COVID recovery, or whether it was the same thing, but just terminology for one versus
We take those two first.
Yeah.
To answer the first, no, there isn't any order actually. This is the projects were put together, and then I actually sat with Graham Clark to work out where the funding would be what would be an appropriate source of funding for each of those project lines. So no, I mean, it could be reordered, but it isn't done in any particular order.
And Chairman, on the second question, post-COVID recovery fund and recovery fund are the same thing. Yeah, apologies for the confusion.
Councillor Brown, your next question.
And then I guess on a similar note, I mean, it's actually already been picked up by Councillor Forster, although on the appendix, the code, I think, for 0.5 is still showing as 43, which I think is the even though the title has changed to community, I think the code is still the same. So I had a question which it was coming from, so we know the answer. But, and then the final one was just on the hardship reserve, was to know what was in the reserve, because for the three other ones it's mentioned in the report how much is in the reserve and how much we want to spend, but I don't think it's mentioned on the hardship one. I may have missed it.
Which ones are you referring to? Sorry.
In the appendix, whenever a new reserve is mentioned, there's a comment about how much is in the reserve. So for example, community recovery, it says 99 on 0.3, it says 99 in the reserve.
Mm-hmm.
But for the hardship reserve 51, I can't see a mention in the table of what's actually still in the reserve.
Okay, Chairman, I can look that up and pass the note around after the meeting to, I mean, there is sufficient because we ran through, as Kirsty said, but I haven't got the figure in my head. It's one of a number of reserves on the balance sheet. So
good, there's sufficient. I guess it'll also be useful to know if there's anything, this is what you're removing out, what might remain in the reserve in that category as well. But thank you.
Yeah, indeed. And Chairman, if I may, what will, I mean, one of the reasons that Kirsty put this in a service plan, and it is, I think it's number 2 in the community service plan, is to accelerate applying these reserves to good schemes around. Now, notwithstanding the very good comments about value for money and criteria, etc. What will happen in 20 months' time is that any unspent reserves that Hart has will transfer to the unitary, and then there's no guarantee that they will continue with their earmarking at that point. And so what Cabinet said when it approved the community service plan was we want to bring forward schemes, legacy schemes, good things in the community to make sure that we accelerate the delivery given the timescale before LGR. Now, normally these would trickle through each budget process as schemes. But there is a sense of pace that we need to have here, and that's one of the reasons, Kirsty, why you've brought this forward now, isn't there? So you've got 18 months to deliver some things against the earmark reserves that the council's earmarked for specific purposes. So that's the context behind it.
I mean, and I have a quick question. I recognise I agree with the comments on the value for money, not least because we have quite a full programme in community services, in fact, across the council at the moment. And I think not only to make sure that we're focusing on the right projects with the value for money, but with potentially further stretch on resources, and with the existing work, these I understand aren't in the budget. So my question is going to be, do we believe that we have the resource to tackle all of these in the time frame? But even if the answer to that is yes, what are we going to do first, and how are we going to prioritize what we do first? So I guess it's a two-part question. Do you believe we have the resource to build all these into the program, and how are we going to prioritize within that resource what will we tackle first, second, third, and so on?
Thank you for that. Yes, I do believe we can deliver these, although it looks like quite a full programme. It's not been dealt with by, each project falls within a range of teams. There's seven service areas within community. So when you split it out between those service areas, it isn't a comprehensive programme as such. So we've already identified that these can be delivered. There were others on the list which I felt could not be delivered within the timeframes. So what you have here is a proposal that we're confident we can deliver, I suppose. And in terms of prioritising those, again, I've been doing some work with Graham Clark over the timeframes for delivery. So some can be delivered this year, and some can be delivered next year. And we've begun to map that out, and that will be reflected in the drawdown of the reserves.
And presumably, if accepted, this proposal, these will be built into the work programme, and so can be reviewed through the service panel as well.
Yes, absolutely.
Great, thank you. Any further questions? Okay, well, we were asked to note the outturn report, and I think we asked some questions and we've noted that. And we were to consider the proposed community projects, and we've, I believe, given some feedback which can move forward, and hopefully that will be taken into account in the deliberations. So thank you, everyone, and thank you, Kirsty.
Thank you very much.
And thank you, Joe, for the outturn report. Means I think we can move on to item 7, which is temporary deployment of mixed plastic and carton banks. Now we have Ashley Wild this evening. I assume, Ashley, you're going to introduce this report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, apologies, I should have introduced myself earlier. So I'm Ashley Wild. I'm the Waste and Recycling Services Manager for the joint waste collection contract between Hart and Basingstoke. Just for the record, I commenced working with Hart back in 2006. So I've got 20 years experience across Hart and the history of the service that we have seen. So in terms of the report, essentially it is for the proposals to deploy temporary mixed plastics and cartons banks, which will help to expand the range of recyclable materials that our residents can recycle, whilst we wait for the new materials recovery facility to be completed by Hampshire, the County Council, with the proposed date of summer 2028. I guess at this point, I would invite any questions regarding the report.
Councillor Brown, I think you were first.
So a couple of questions. One was just, I guess, a point of clarification in terms of what happens currently to the mixed plastics and cartons, as in if a resident puts it into their recycling and it turns up. My understanding is that it goes for incineration. I guess my specific question was just understanding, is it separated out so that the plastics and the cartons are together, or is it with lots of other stuff that goes for incineration? I had one other question, but maybe try and clarify.
Absolutely, thank you, Councillor. So in terms of mixed plastics and cartons within the recycling stream at the moment, the existing facilities are ageing. They have a technical limitation in terms of the types of materials that they can currently sort and separate from that mixed material. So plastic pots, tubs, trays and cartons are currently either we recommend residents to put them into the household waste bin at the moment because we don't have the infrastructure available to separate them. Alternatively, if residents do think that they are the right materials for recycling, they go into the recycling containers. They will be filtered out through the various processes operating throughout that facility. So they are considered as a process reject, and they are filtered out through the various systems, and they will then be rejected and sent for incineration.
The reason for asking the question is, are they identified separately from, because I suppose the reason for asking the question will come maybe clear when I ask my second question, but it's just understanding, are they sitting somewhere as one type of product that then gets incinerated, or are they mixed with other stuff that, I suppose the reason being is actually if they're all sitting there as one type of product, could they not go from there to one of the, like, be collected and taken for recycling within the process that we're talking about doing?
That makes perfect sense. Yes. So essentially, if the material goes into the recycling container and it is filtered out through the MRF facility, it's mixed in with all different other types of process reject materials. So the material essentially comes in mixed in the front end. It goes through things like trommel screens, which are kind of almost like the inside of a washing machine, and they filter out lighter elements like paper, cardboard. We have rotating disc screens that filter out cardboard. As again, we have an array of what we call overband magnets that then filter out the tins, the cans, the aluminium cans. And then we have optical sorting technology, which essentially removes the plastic bottles. So essentially, once the mixed material goes through those various processes, whatever is not extracted at those points is then rejected. So it could include things like plastic films, carrier bags, it could be nappies, it could be glass, it could anything that isn't filtered out with those kind of constituent core components.
Thank you. And then if I'm able, so that's really helpful. The second question, I guess, is, on paper, this looks like a really sensible thing to do. I guess my question is there any way of looking at the overall environmental cost benefit of doing this? And I suppose from a cost point of view, I'm thinking for a couple of years, there's going to be potentially like CO2 impacts of these new bins being put in place, people driving to the place to deposit this product, the collection of this material, my understanding from the report, the transport of this to somewhere in Europe rather than in the UK, and just understanding the kind of environmental cost of that versus the potential benefit that we think there will be for, I guess, 2 years of collection of something that isn't being currently collected and recycled.
Good question, quite a broad reaching question as well. In terms of overall environmental benefits, we don't have any kind of options for benchmarking. There aren't really any other local authorities that are doing this. I think Portsmouth did run a trial 2, maybe 3 years ago, and the contractor that they were using wasn't particularly reliable, and I think we could probably leave it at that. The issue with plastics is that they have a very high, what we call fossil carbon content. Now, further down the line from 2028, we'll get into the realms of emissions trading, whereby there will be a lot of focus on removing this material from the incineration stream because of the amount of fossil carbon that they generate when they're burned. So there is a significant carbon reduction benefit to this in terms of the material. I take your point around exporting to Europe. At the moment, I think all 5 of the contractors that we'd approached originally had suggested to us that they have sorting and processing infrastructure within the UK. At the moment, it's the same process for the whole of the UK. The one carton recycling facility that was in Halifax stopped accepting cartons a couple of months ago. So any carton that's collected across the UK is currently sent to Western Europe for recycling. We can't get around that. There's nothing we can do about that. So yes, the overall environmental benefit is difficult to quantify at the moment because we don't have any benchmarking data. We don't have the data from other local authorities that have done something similar. But I think it's probably we've got there's a lot of public support for this type of approach, and certainly from the deployment that we've just done in Basingstoke, there is a lot of interest and a lot of pressure to get this material into the curbside service ASAP, really. So it's very much going to support the request from many of our residents.
Councillor Smith.
Yeah, I'd echo that. That residents are very keen to have this recyclable at the curbside. It's always been difficult to explain why we don't do it, and also classify exactly what's meant by these particular thin film plastics, and it relies on residents to know. And of course, the question is, well, do they really know, or are they going to be putting things even in these banks which are not actually intended for in these banks? That's one kind of question. The second is, many supermarkets already accept these in cages near their entrances. I think I know 3 that do. So are we just going to be diverting from those and then picking up the cost for transporting those, etc., where they're already places to take them? Because this will be people who are incentivized to do that extra step, to take it out of their home, sort them, but take them somewhere. And if they'd already take them somewhere, for example, a supermarket, will this actually be incremental, or will it just be replacing someone somewhere that's already doing it anyway? I've got one other question, but those are sort of the related ones, so I'll leave you with those for now.
Thank you. I think there may be some confusion there. I think what you've suggested in terms of the material take back at supermarkets relates to flexible plastics. So that's things like bread bags, carrier bags. That's what the cages inside some of the supermarket front doors are collecting. So that relates to a material stream at the moment that it's very difficult to sort and separate that material. DEFRA had originally proposed that needed to be included in curbside recycling collection services across the UK from April 2027. However, last month they have essentially put out a statement to say that they are going to revise the regulations, and that deadline will be pushed back to 2030. And that is because across the waste and recycling sector, the processing technology to sort and separate flexibles is just not there to deal with this material in such vast quantities. So there has been a very successful trial called the Flex Collect system, which uses essentially kind of like what they call a survival bag. So you supply residents with a bag, ironically, to store their flexible plastics within. That bag can actually then go into the recycling container in its entirety, and then it can be picked out on the sorting line at the recycling facility. So that did inspire some confidence in the process on a small scale, but in terms of the volume of material that's currently available on the market, we just don't have the ability to deal with it in such vast scales. In terms of material acceptance at the mixed plastics banks, so we are talking about plastic pots, tubs, trays, tubes. So that will cover, I guess, anything from meat trays or fish trays, anything that comes in kind of a spreadable container. So whether that's something like a butter, margarine spread, Philadelphia, those types of tubs, yogurt pots. And in terms of tubes, it's things like toothpaste tubes and cosmetics tubes as well. So it's really is expanding that range of material. And this was introduced under the simpler recycling regulations last year.
Yeah, I know the supermarkets do have the thin films recycling separately, but I thought they also did yogurt pots, many of them, but I haven't noticed. I know they're there. I don't use them. I know they're there, but I haven't recently looked at the classifications on them, so I'll have to go back and have a look at that. Yeah, I know I never claimed to be using them. I said other people. The other point was the locations where these are going to be sited. One of them, for example, Crossways Manor in Hook. Residents do misuse them. Anything that's been there, when it was cardboard, when they were taken away. The electrical one is crazily misused with things dumped there that should never go in there. And I'm worried that this will be even worse because it's more on the waste rather than the sort of larger e-waste sort of side of things. So, and it's specifically one of the areas that hasn't got CCTV. So I'm quite concerned about that location being used. Are there any plans to add CCTV there to enhance it? I doubt it.
Again, it's another very good point. So the misuse and the abuse at Bring Sites comes in a number of different kind of shapes and sizes, if you like. So I've got a picture here, actually, that might just help in terms of what we've just deployed in Basingstoke. So there is a flap aperture on the top. So residents can just lift the lid and it's almost like a post box style aperture inside. So residents can then just feed the material in the top there. The lid is actually secured via what we call a spine lock with then a combination padlock on the top as well. So it's not like a resident can then just lift the lid and then just throw whatever they like in there, whether it be a microwave or a bag of household waste. So there are some ways to kind of mitigate the abuse in terms of incorrect materials or contamination. Now, once these are deployed or subject to the approval from Cabinet, once they're deployed, we will be monitoring them at least twice a week just to keep on top of any issues at specific sites. We'll be working with our street cleansing colleagues to clear any additional materials. And we also, as you should all be aware, that we work with Serco as well. So we have the resources that we can call on from Serco if absolutely necessary, if we find that, one of these bins is so badly contaminated that it does need to be emptied as household waste. But with these kind of mitigating designs, I guess, of these containers and with the frequent monitoring, I'm fairly confident that we can pick up on these quite quickly and quite early on and deal with them quite speedily.
Supplementary there on the Basingstoke situation, because I had seen some reports about the trial that's going on there. Is there anything from that you want to that wasn't in this report that you want to highlight about how it's going?
Again, very good question. And my comment back to that would probably be, I would say, we had our first collection on Monday. So they've literally been in, they went in a week Friday.
Just going to jump in as it's a related topic, so apologies for the people that were going to be next, but you say on page 50, paragraph 45, that none of the contractors will empty contaminated containers. How rigid is that as a statement, and what cost assumptions have we made for, if there is abuse and we have to monitor these frequently, for the monitoring of these, or indeed the Serco clear up as household waste, which of course wouldn't be recycling anyway. But have we considered what the cost may be in practical terms for dealing with non-collection because of contamination?
Yeah, again, it's another very good question. In terms of contamination, there is always it's a sliding scale. So when we talk about really significant contamination, we're talking about the contractor arriving on site, taking the padlock off, opening the bin, finding black bag waste in there, finding nappies, finding real obvious stuff that shouldn't be in there. And again, that's why with the kind of the flap aperture, we're kind of restricting the space or the size of the material that can go in. That should have some impact on tackling that. In terms of Serco, because we have Serco as our waste collection contractor, we've got that resource that we can call on. We can do what we call under our contract as a return to collect, which is where we just ask Serco to go along and empty a container outside of a normal collection schedule, and we're normally talking in the region of £20 to do that.
Councillor Forster.
I have to say, Ashley, I'm delighted to see this finally being done. Some of us have been calling for it for many years. I'd like to ask a number of questions. The first one, if I may, is I understand in Wokingham they are still successfully collecting all these items in their normal household waste and have been for some years. You can't go back and say, why haven't we been doing that? But I wondered why we're not doing that now. A second question is in terms of catching up with Basingstoke. Basingstoke's got weekly bin collections and I understand is moving to fortnightly bin collections. So residents are saying that one of the reasons that Basingstoke is doing this is to offset the move to fortnightly bin collections. There's been rumour in Hart that 3 weekly bin collections were rumoured. First of all, can I ask you to confirm that that isn't going to happen? And secondly, are we just doing this because Basingstoke is and it's therefore viable for us to do it, but actually it's driven by Basingstoke, not by Hart? My next question relates to the contamination rates. I noticed, I think it was 24.6 or 25% contamination at the moment. How does that compare to other authorities, non-Hart authorities? So for instance, East Hampshire or Winchester. How does our local contamination compare to others who have pretty similar collections? My last point relates to the breakdown and the recommendations at 42 are to use contractor 1 for a weekly collection, but the costs we had indicate comparable collections, all of them on a similar sort of basis, not what's recommended here to use contractor 1 topped up by occasional collections from contractor 2 or 3. Is that not going to have a much more significantly increased cost for those ad hoc or extra collections? Because there's no detail in here whatsoever on the pricing. My very last point, if I may, is you talk about CCTV, and Ashley, I'm sure you expect me to raise CCTV because it's something we've had an ongoing dialogue about the non-enforcement of fly tipping and littering at Church Road car park, which has got CCTV, but apparently isn't used to enforce any of the bring banks. Hart removed cardboard recycling from the bring banks because of the abuse and littering, which was frowned upon by the majority of our residents, but nonetheless we did it. We're now bringing back something that is likely to be smelly, to be abused, and I wondered how this is really going to be enforced, not with regular fortnightly collection checks and things like that, or weekly checks, but actually through proper enforcement with real-time CCTV coverage and prosecutions or fines for anyone who does abuse it.
Jim, can I just say that some of those questions probably fall outside of Ashley's control. So, I mean, they might be for the portfolio holder. It might be that you decide to pass those on to Cabinet as concerns as this flows through to them. But I think Ashley can obviously answer the technical questions about it, but some of those other matters.
In which case, Ashley, answer what you're able to. If it falls outside and we still need an answer, we can perhaps seek a response outside of this meeting.
Chairman, may I just say on that, it is very disappointing with a paper like this that the portfolio holder isn't here. And I would like to request, I know you have done, that the portfolio holders attend overview and scrutiny when an item in their portfolio comes up. I think this is exactly why the portfolio holder should be here.
I am aware the portfolio holder is at another meeting this evening, and he did make us aware of that. Ashley, sorry.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Councillor Forster. Yes, numerous questions. I will do my best to answer most of them. So in terms of Wokingham, this all depends on different infrastructure within different geographical areas. So we touched on earlier that the facilities within Hampshire are getting quite old. They need to be updated. In terms of Wokingham, that falls within West Berks, so it's over the border. They have a completely different setup to us in terms of their MRF. They have different sorting lines. Their MRF is much larger. They have the ability to actually sort and separate these materials and pull them off of the recycling stream coming through that facility. So this goes back to the point I think was raised earlier, whereby somebody in another authority outside of Hampshire may be collecting or putting, have the ability to recycle plastic pots, tubs, trays within their recycling bin, but we can't do it within Hampshire. So it's all based on the different infrastructure arrangements across different waste disposal authority areas. In terms of BDBC, Basingstoke and Deane Council have just deployed a new resources and waste strategy, or recycling and waste strategy, which sets out lots of different aspects in terms of trying to reduce household waste, increase recycling to hit the targets under the Environment Act 2021. So it may just be coincidental that there was pressure to try and get this done with the move to AWC to assist residents with helping to offset some of those capacity concerns that they had. But it's always been on the agenda, I think, as you previously aware, Councillor Forster, that we have been looking at mixed plastics for a number of years now. Previously and prior to the Environment Act 2021 being published, the mixed plastics market was particularly volatile. It still is quite volatile at the moment. However, the scope of packaging regulations and the legislative changes that DEFRA and the UK government brought in were essentially kind of geared up to try and incentivise this kind of circular economy, circular loop within the UK. And it's almost kickstarting investment in UK infrastructure, which is then just encouraging stability of those markets. So we now know, for example, that Veolia, as a national contractor, have invested significant money in a brand new mixed plastics recycling facility in, I think it's Shropshire, or the West Midlands area. So we know that the infrastructure is coming online slowly, and that will stabilise the markets. And then we've got less reliance on export markets. It's kind of keeping that material within the UK in that closed loop type of approach. In terms of the comment regarding Hearts moving to 3 weekly collections, as far as I'm aware, that's not something that's being considered. I'm not sure where that has come from, but certainly this side of LGR, it's not anything that we are looking at. Good, thanks. In terms of being driven by BDBC, I think I'd just go back to my previous point, Councillor Forster, just regarding the resources and waste strategy that Basingstoke have recently published as one of these aspects to help achieve the targets under the Environment Act 2021. So I think we can certainly learn from what we've done in Basingstoke as almost the guinea pig. And I think there will be value in terms of the early few weeks of this service, and that we can look at potentially lessons learned and how we deploy this in Hart potentially later on in the year. But I really don't, I don't think that it is something that has been driven by BDBC, not specifically. In terms of contamination comparison, interesting question, because contamination rates across Hampshire kind of range between 18-19% and anything up to about 30% fairly consistently. I'm part of a national group which is the Local Authority Recycling Advisory Committee, also shortened to LARAC, and I sit on a forum of 20 or 21 authority officers from across the wider UK. Now, I'd had conversations with some of our colleagues in the north and Durham and the likes of Newcastle underline, they are seeing contamination rates north of 40% in some of their MRFs. Now, not really sure why they are having such significant issues, but again, in terms of comparison, okay, we may not be the best in terms of contamination across Hampshire, but there are obviously other areas around the UK where they are having much more significant struggles with a contamination rate, where it is significantly much higher. In terms of the contractor proposals, at the moment, all of the contractors that we approached could only provide one collection from each of those sites a week. There is one contractor who said that they could visit Church Road twice in that week, but all of the other sites would still have one collection in that week. So the proposal to utilise a kind of a plug the gap approach or a hybrid arrangement to utilise contractors 2 and or 3 would fall off the back of if, for example, we found that the Bring site in Hook, if it was emptied on a Monday, but then come Thursday it was full again, that contractor won't be able to visit again until the following Monday. So to kind of mitigate the capacity concerns and to try and mitigate any risk of overflow, we have the potential then to call on another contractor who may be working in a slightly different way to contractor 1, whereby they'll be in the Hook area on a Thursday or a Friday. So it was a real mix, kind of hybrid. So in the pricing table that I put in there for contractors 1, 2, and 3, this was their annual service cost based on just utilising that one contractor. And then underneath that pricing schedule, I've kind of created a hybrid arrangement to show the maximum collection frequency that we could get at each of those sites using a mix of all 3 of those different contractors, which then kind of has a slightly different price implication. It's about £8,500. So that was kind of a worst case scenario on having all 3 contractors visiting on different times of that collection week. And a couple of those contractors actually visit certain areas of our district on the same day. So it's not like we were just doubling the cost or just saying, well, contractor 1, you can do it on a Monday, contractor 2, you can do this one on a Wednesday. And if necessary, contractor 3 could do it on a Friday, because it was just based on those individual collection schedules. The point around pricing, I had to keep this fairly high level because their individual pricing is considered commercially sensitive. Given that these documents are available in the public domain, what I didn't want to do is name a specific contractor and then essentially, share their pricing information with a competitor. It's commercially sensitive, and it's just it's not just and it's not fair. Hence why I've just referenced them as contractor 1, 2, and 3. And the last point around non-enforcement of CCTV, I think, is the one that I probably need to revert back to, potentially the portfolio holder.
We'll.
I don't have the technical detail on that one.
And get a separate answer on the enforcement.
As Chairman, we'll reflect that in the observations of the committee, and then on its way to Cabinet, the portfolio holder will see that.
Indeed,
Chair, I do have a supplementary, but first of all, I'd like to thank Ashley for the comprehensive and detailed response, which I think leaves me much more comfortable with the progress. So thank you for that and the detailed answers. The supplementary I have in terms of the overall comment about the reason we're doing this is because the MRF isn't coming, the MRF, Materials Recycling Facility, isn't coming on stream till 2028. My understanding is that is because the decision by Southampton, Portsmouth, and Hampshire County Council was made roughly halfway, maybe April or May 25, because it was delayed until government had issued at the very end of 24 the rules on simpler recycling, and to have done anything in advance would have jeopardised what was done. So that was the main reason for the delay, is my understanding, and it's about a £51 million investment in the MRF that's coming on stream at the beginning of 28. Will we be ready when that comes on stream for the collections to commence in the Hart area, which might be unitarised about the same sort of time, at that point. And in the interim, the comment that I think it was Councillor Smith made around electricals and the problems that we've got with electricals, is there anything that we can be doing to address the electricals issue and additional clothes collections when our clothes banks are full, to get more collections and bigger items, particularly on the electricals?
Thank you. I think I caught most of that. Yes, your understanding is the same as my understanding in terms of the delays to the MRF. There was a change to the preferred default option of fully commingled recycling, which would see everything go into a single recycling container. For a couple of years, that was the preferred default option. And when the legislation was confirmed, the proposed default preference was to go along what we call a twin stream recycling collection. So nationally, the default position would be separate collection of paper and cardboard, and then all other recyclable materials in a single container, i.e. a wheeled bin. Cost statement, you were right in the middle. It's 50.5 million. According to Hampshire, yes, 50.5 million on the new MRF infrastructure. I think this kind of just backs up the point that these facilities are very, very expensive. They're very capital heavy. There's a lot of technology in there. The blueprint for MRFs at the moment was the one that opened in Coventry. It was about 65 or 66 million pounds worth of investment, but that runs on robotics, and there's a lot of AI implementation in that MRF as well. So it's kind of really moving on with the times, utilising technology, utilising AI in this new facility. And we've confirmed with Hampshire that we will have the similar technologies within this new MRF, which will allow us to include things like plastic plant pots and cosmetics and toothpaste tubes. They can all be sorted from this facility. In terms of being ready, so this kind of ties in with the LGR conversations, and we've had a number of conversations already with our colleagues in Rushmore. Rushmore utilise Serco as a waste collection contractor currently, as do Hart and Basingstoke. So it makes sense to have those conversations sooner rather than later to look at vehicle specifications. We're looking at cross-border working, how we can align our collection services, what our different policies are, what we need to align in terms of our policy provision. So in terms of the twin stream deployment, we've already done some modelled work with Serco to look at how many vehicles we need, for example, how we will deal with our communal bin stores. We are looking at proposals for vehicle specification and what we need to support this service. At the moment, it appears that we will utilise the same vehicle specification as what we've currently got across Hart and Basingstoke. So that's using the twin-bodied collection vehicle, so we can collect both of these types of materials using the same vehicle, potentially even on the same pass. We are having conversations with Rushmore about different container configurations and different container types. So at the moment, we're just looking at what we need to consider to align our services in terms of frontline vehicle provision, number of collection rounds, vehicle specification types that we need, and again, going back to the policy as well. So the conversations are being had. I think the biggest point with being ready for the twin stream collection approach is the deployment of the necessary containers, or the procurement and deployment of those containers, and the communications. Because for years and years and years, we've always said to our residents, keep your plastic pots, tubs, trays out of your recycling bin, put them in the waste bin, because we don't have sorting facilities. And then obviously there will come a point when this new MRF goes live where we will communicate that to our residents. So there's going to be a big communications campaign off the back of this, amplifying the messaging that comes out of the county council up until the point that LGR hits. So yeah, it's the communication and trying to clarify the position with residents, because I think there will be an initial bulk of confusion
whilst that message sinks in.
Okay, can I? Is it very quick, Councillor Forster? I've got
just the remainder question.
So sorry, Councillor Forster, just remind me of the point on the electricals.
In the interim, are we able to do anything to collect larger electricals and more clothes recycling at the bring banks?
Certainly. So the what's interesting is the curbside collection of small we generally restrict to something that will fit into a carrier bag. The apertures on the wee banks that we've got across the borough are actually fairly significantly larger. So what we're finding is that a recent review of the type of material that's now going into those wee banks is actually larger stuff that's too large for the curbside, but still just about large enough to fit through that aperture. So we are already kind of seeing that shift. What's interesting is that even with the deployment of the curbside small wee collection, the banks are still being really well utilised for this large material. So there's clearly a need for them. In terms of the fires that we've had recently, there is a general increase in them across the UK. I think we face about an average of 6 every single day, RCV related fires. Most of them are attributable to lithium-ion batteries rather than WEEE, or the WEEE that contains the batteries. The problem that we've got with battery collections and battery recycling is that it's much more heavily regulated than the collection of small WEEE. So, for example, at our waste transfer stations at Chinham or at Farnborough, we can store WEEE material under a permit exemption from the Environment Agency. When we start talking about collecting and storing batteries because they're considered hazardous waste, it introduces a whole new realm of legislative requirements, permitting, site risk assessments, deluge systems, fire suppressants. It opens up quite literally a can of worms. It's very difficult. Last point on clothing. The used textile market at the moment is, I would suggest, on its knees, not quite at the verge of collapse. However, this kind of significant uptake in ultra fast fashion from things like Shein and Temu that are now flooding the market, the material quality is very, very poor. And because the material is very, very poor, it doesn't fetch a high market value. We also see the increase in reuse sites like Facebook, eBay, Vinted is obviously a big one that's come along in recent years. So where there is material value, people are generally selling that material to make back some kind of income from that or to offset some of their costs. So what is going into a lot of these textile banks now into charity shops is generally quite poor quality. And I'd had a conversation fairly recently with somebody who represents British Heart Foundation nationally, and they're saying that the rate of income that they're seeing at the back end of the BHF stores on the high street is ranging from 5 to 7 pence per kilo, so 50 to 70 pounds per tonne. Back in 2010, 2011, we were up to about £500, £600 per tonne. So the market has quite literally fallen out of the bottom. So yeah, clothing is a difficult situation at the moment, and there are talks nationally around some kind of extended producer responsibility scheme to try and incentivize manufacturers to operate potentially like a clothing take back scheme.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Forster. I have Councillor Thomas followed by Councillor Butler.
A bit quick. And, I mean, first of all, just to compliment your depth of knowledge, just listening to you kind of manage all these various questions. You clearly know your stuff. It's impressive to kind of listen to you speak. Most of my questions are more just making sure I understand the paper. So forgive me if they're a bit basic. I just wanted to double check under like the contamination point. It makes a point that there's this public perception that mixed plastics can't be recycled by the existing curbside. But then in 20, it talks about the level of contamination from those mixed plastics. And so is it saying it's 13% of the 24? So it's roughly 2%, 2.5% of the overall? Because that makes me think it's quite small. So it made me think that you talked about the communications campaign. Is it a communications campaign to make people realise they shouldn't be putting it in the curbside, or is it actually they're not putting it in the curbside because it's only 2%, and actually they're storing these things up and they need to know these facilities are there to meet that pent up demand? I couldn't quite work out what those two paragraphs are saying.
Thank you. Okay, so in terms of, thank you very much for the positive feedback about the knowledge. I think that just comes from 20 years of waste experience, but thank you, it's appreciated. Generally, I'd say it is a generalisation that the perception is that mixed plastics can be recycled. Lots of residents will look at the material item, they'll see a triangle, they'll see a, recycle. They'll put it into the recycling container because they think it's the right thing. Even if there is some confusion, does it go in a waste bin? Does it go in a recycling bin? Residents may put it into the recycling bin because they think, oh, it's plastic, I can recycle plastic bottles. It's that kind of perception that it's a plastic, it's got recycling label on the material, therefore it's got to be recyclable. Residents don't have the depth of knowledge that I do, and I wouldn't expect any of them to come close to that because I'm a little bit anal when it comes to this. So yeah, it's around the perception. It's also going back to the point around kind of different infrastructure around the country. So you may have a relative that is in West Berks or a relative that's in Northamptonshire, for example, and you have the conversation with them, or you go to their house, and they can recycle mixed plastics. There's that, oh yeah, okay, well, if you can do it, then I can do it.
Is it a lot there? Is it quite a small amount?
So I think I'm happy to revise that paragraph because what it should say is that it's actually 13% of that overall 24. So it's just over half.
Right.
So in terms of the waste composition analysis that Hampshire have done, or that we've been doing for a number of years, we see this kind of contamination level fluctuate. And what they do is they take a sample of recycling and then they separate it by the constituent components, and we get a percentage makeup of that sampled load relating to plastic pots, tubs, trays, cartons, batteries, for example.
You've answered the question. So fundamentally, it's a case of
it's a significant proportion. So at the point that we can then start putting this material into the recycling bin, we will see almost overnight our contamination rate significantly drop. Don't quote me because I'm not going to say it will half, but there will be a significant drop in that material.
Comprehensive comms.
Absolutely. Yeah. We don't want to communicate to people right up until the point that we change our service to say, don't recycle your mixed plastics, to then the following week say, oh, you can now recycle your mixed plastics.
Makes perfect sense.
So we almost need a bit of downtime between kind of stopping that message, a little bit of downtime, and then really hitting that comms campaign hard.
Excellent. And there's just one other quick question. I just wanted to double check on the options. And I probably just missed it, is a recommendation to use refurbished containers?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so that's purely based on cost. These containers, brand new, have a lifespan again of at least 5 years. I mean, we've got some in some of our bin stores in Basingstoke that we've had 10, 15 years plus. So yeah, they get to a point where they look really, really shabby because they are painted, labels start to fall off, they do get worn. And then what you can do is you can send them off to the manufacturer for what we call a refurbishment, which essentially hammers out the dents, it goes back on a press, they respray it, they put 4 new casters or 4 new wheels on the bottom, they put a new lid on it, and it looks almost brand new. Okay. And for the purposes of this, because it is a temporary deployment, we don't need them in here really longer than potentially a 2-year period. My recommendation is just to utilise refurbished containers because, for all intents and purposes, they do exactly the same thing.
That's great value for money.
I think you have your answers. Thank you. Councillor Butler.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, a very quick question, but can I have my thanks as well, Ashley? When I get together with my girly friends, I talk about stuff I do at the council. I often quote you as being, really nerdy and geeky, and what a pleasure! What a pleasure it is. I mean that in a compliment. Yeah, absolutely. What a pleasure it is to listen to you. That your knowledge and your passion. So thank you very much. Thank you. It's something I will miss when I'm no longer a councillor in 2 years' time. It's just a really quick question. So you talked about possibly 1 bin or 2 bins on each of these sites. If this service really takes off and people really pick up on it, is there capacity for more bins?
So at the moment, we can have a bit of a rearrangement of some of our bring sites where we might be able to accommodate a third container, possibly a fourth. So the likes of Hawley, the Hawley Community Centre, or the hall on Hawley Road, for example, that has a very large car park, again covered by CCTV, so we could expand the number of containers. The car park in Odium off Deer Park View is very tight, so having reviewed the collection arrangement there, we don't feel that we could do anything more than the 2 containers, which is why this kind of hybrid arrangement might be more suitable, because we could have more containers at a larger site that can accommodate it on a less frequent collection, and then a more frequent collection at a site which has fewer containers, for example. So it's trying to get the best of both worlds, but with that monitoring several times per week to try and gauge the uptake, the participation, and the fill level and the fill rates, we can then work on, actually, we need to do some fine tweaking of this collection service here.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. Councillor Drage.
Yes, yes, yes. You've got my full support. When it goes live, I want a tour of the Murph, please, to see it all in action. There we go. That's it.
It's more a statement and a request than a question, but nevertheless, thank you. Any more? No. Ashley, thank you very much for the paper, and I think comprehensive answers to questions is probably understating it, but I think other people have said that already, so thank you very much indeed. And you're more than welcome to stay for the rest of it if you choose, but if you need to go, feel free.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. We move on to feedback from the 2 service panels. I was going to say we'll take it alphabetically. That'll probably get it around the wrong way. I think we'll start with community.
Thank you.
Kirsty, are you still on the call?
No, I suspect she's gone.
No, I'm still on the call.
Oh, okay, wonderful. It wasn't obligatory. I just wondered as we were about to do the community. Councillor Butler, are you going to give the feedback?
I'll kick off, thank you. So there are four of us appointed to this particular panel. 3 of us turned up. So Councillor Jones, Councillor Beatty and myself. The service priorities are progressing well. We asked questions about weeding, and we were told this might not happen for the second time. You know, there's two weeding kind of cuts on the programme. It might only be 1 because of the temperatures. We talked about the job fair that has happened recently, which has had a lot of support from local businesses and was fully subscribed. Very successful Think, Drive, Stay Alive work that the community safety team are doing with 6 formers within the district. We talked about Heathlands, a bit of a hold up on that, waiting for legal agreement with Vivid. We talked about slumping house building impacting on the availability of affordable homes within Hart. I think we have 10, I think it was 10 people rather than 10 families, I wasn't quite sure, in bed and breakfast, which is very high for us, but we are using, for instance, service departments in Farnborough. On the flip side, Hart's purchase of family homes, because the market has actually worked in our favour, and we've bought some properties below market rate. Thank you. I think Richard wanted to add a.
Yes, thank you. There's just a couple of things for me. We had quite a lot of conversation about the housing list and the way that new affordable homes are not, if you like, appearing for fulfilment of some of the people on the housing register. So we had quite a lot of discussion around the difficulties that the team has in making sure that all of our residents are well catered for from a housing point of view and kept off the streets. And we do know that Kirsty mentioned that one of her measures is how many people have we got in bed and breakfast at any one time? And at the time it was 10, I believe. So it's a long discussion that we had around all of those things. In fact, some challenges about when do we recognise that housing and people not having homes becomes a really big issue that we need to do something different about. So that was just a discussion. We had another discussion about the disabilities facilities grants. There is some difficulty around Hampshire County Council's process for triaging applications for these grants. Though unfortunately we didn't have a Hampshire County councillor at the meeting with us. So Kirsty has agreed that she will write to try and find out what is happening with regard to the triage process with Hampshire County Council. Hopefully we'll hear a response about that at the next panel review. We also talked a little bit about staffing. We had one traffic warden employed and one went, so we ended up back where we were. But we did get a new senior ranger, Rachel Jones, apparently very experienced, been with us before. No relative. But it was a very good meeting, well attended.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Kirsty, any comments on anything that's been said?
No, that's good to hear, and an accurate reflection of the meeting. Just to remind councillors that Nicola Harpham from the Housing Development team is actually doing a show and tell in front of the next full council. So if anybody wanted to explore some of those issues around housing demand and the housing market and the kind of properties that we're able to bring forward, it's a great opportunity to come and have a chat to Nicola and her team.
Okay, thank you, Kirsty. Councillor Drage.
Hi, Kirsty. Councillor Butler just said something, and I was going to ask you anyway. Heathlands Court, how are we getting on? Because the last thing I heard, it was all guns, all going ahead. Where are we with it? If that's okay, could you give us a quick update?
Thanks, Councillor Drage. I think you asked me this at the last time you were overviewing Scrutiny. I met with the team yesterday, actually, and it is all progressing. There was a delay over getting the legal agreements drawn up and signed, but it is now all systems go, if you like. We've got contractors out on site speccing up the work. We're talking to residents, and prep's being made for the planning application to go in for some of the works that will need planning consent. And again, part of Nicola's show and tell in front of just before full council will be around where we are with Heathlands and what it's looking like. So again, can only encourage members to come along and chat to Nicola and the team then. But yeah, we are over the hurdles, I'd like to think.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Councillor Smith.
Yeah, just to comment on the fly posting, the report said that it was a success that no fixed penalty notices were issued for fly posting in the quarter. But I did raise this as a member question, which was residents have been telling me that there were fly posters of banners and adverts on lampposts, and in Hook, in one particular case, there was almost a blanket area campaign, and not only was no penalty issued, but they were left there for the person posting them to take them down a week or two later. Meanwhile, a pharmacist asked me if they could put one banner up, and before I could get back to them, they'd put it up, and within a day had a visit and told they have to take it down or they'd be fined. So it's being applied a little bit patchily, I think. You can say it's a great success that no fines have been issued, but if poster is happening anyway and the fines aren't being issued, is that a success or not?
I'm happy just to make the comment, I suppose, that we have one enforcement officer who deals with this and litter enforcement and dog fouling enforcement. So he is very thinly spread across the district, but he is extremely reactive. So if you get complaints, Councillor Smith, if you direct them to myself or to Rachel Wilkinson, who manages that service area, we'll make sure that's picked up and we can direct him to to that particular area.
That is what I did, and I was told that the person who put them up said they promised to take them down. As I say, meanwhile, the one single banner was jumped on, maybe because it would be easier as a sole operative. Oh, well, I know I can go and address that because it's just one banner. So I think they're being allowed to propagate as long as they're promised to be taken down. That's not really the point of the campaign, really, of the Right in Place campaign.
I can pass that comment on to the team and see what happened in that particular circumstance.
Sorry, thank you, Kirsty. Didn't have my microphone on. Councillor Forster.
Thank you. If I can just add to Councillor Smith's comment, I heard Councillor Jones say we're one person down again, or still on enforcement officers, but we only have one enforcement officer who's overstretched in terms of fly tipping and littering. Would it not be possible to via the budget for a parking enforcement officer across to recruit an extra person, even in the short term, the underspend, to do more enforcement of things like fly posting, etc., because that might help alleviate the problem. And I reiterate the comments about fly posting. We seem to turn a blind eye when it's Fleet Town Council putting up banners without permission and leaving them there for over the statutory 2 weeks. So please, can that be looked at?
Thanks, Councillor Forster. I can raise that with the team. I wouldn't want to reduce the capacity within the parking team, though. That is a really small, critical team that keeps our car parks safe, and they have they sort of work around the clock, and we have weekend shifts to cover. So it's really important that team is staffed up. So I'm going back out to advert this week on that one. Hopefully we'll be able to find somebody suitable for that role.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Brown.
Just a quick one on whether it's appropriate now, but looking forward in 26/7, there's a reference at the bottom to Kingsway works completed, and I just wondered whether, like, above that we've got Habitat Bank go live in autumn. I just wondered on Kingsway whether there was sort of more specifics around like potential timings or targets for that. I'm happy for that to be offline if that's more appropriate.
I can come back to you, Councillor Brown, on the particular timings for that. But we've made good progress on that one, and we've just signed the agreement with the EA on that. So I can come back with some more details. But yeah, progress has been good.
Thanks, Kirsty. I think notes have been made of that. Councillor Thomas.
It was just a very quick one in relation to the risks and the specific risk around the, is it B&D failed to sign a contract extension for grounds maintenance? And I see that the residual rating's 5 on the basis that likelihood is 1, which is saying it's rare. And then the commentary talks about the fact there's a first draft. Is it still in first draft, or has it moved beyond that now? Because I was just interested that first draft got us to the point of almost saying it was rare. There's probably still a way to go in terms of actually getting that over the line. Or has it moved on since that risk update?
I think we discussed that at the service panel meeting, and I think Adam Green said that we were almost there in terms of getting that extension. But I don't know, Graham, you may have more information on that. I know you attend the meetings with Basingstoke and Dean.
I thought it had been agreed personally.
Yeah.
I'm surprised to see it on there.
Very good.
We just clarify.
Yeah.
Thank you. That will clear that one up, I think. Yes, Councillor Forster.
Just one request on the RAG status that's showing on various forms. We've got a RAG statement. Well, my understanding is that that's red, amber, or green, but we've got yellow on there, and not everything is colour coded. Can someone explain that to me? Page 22 is an example. Page 73.
You're referring to the table with the scales. I think Kirsty or Graham have a comment on
Well,
it.
Chairman, the table at page 73 is the key for the risk ratings, and so they should correspond with the ratings in the risk register above. They don't correspond to the performance against service plan objectives, priorities further up. In fact, at the top of page 59 explains what the RAG status is in relation to service priorities. But page 73 is just in relation to the risk register, and that's the sort of house standard for heart.
I think I'm just saying it a different way, which is the RAG status is the service one, which is literally there are 3, whereas the risk status there are more than 3 levels, so that's why there's more than 3 colours.
Yeah, correct.
Okay. Any further questions on community? No. Okay. Kirsty, thank you very much on that one.
My pleasure.
We will move on to corporate. Councillor Brown, are you able to start at least the feedback?
I will start the feedback with, so probably not in the detail that Councillor Butler did on the community one, but I guess with a couple of caveats in that it was my first attendance at a service panel. I was on holiday and dialed it in from a hotel room. So Councillor Bailey was also present, but obviously not present today, and Councillor Farmer. So hopefully you can jump in as well. And it was this time just with Mr. Clark, because everyone else that might have joined from an officer side was also on holiday. With that caveat, I guess for me, with the first attendance of it, I found it incredibly useful meeting in terms of the ability to kind of ask what might come across as potentially stupid questions in a safe environment, and to kind of go through. And I felt very confident in kind of the report that had been done, the discussions that we had, and probably for me, I guess the value, which might only seem relatively small, but there's a couple of things that have been updated on this report as it is presented today from conversations and discussions that went on at that service panel, which I think then makes the report that you're seeing kind of even more useful. And so a couple of examples of that are, for example, on the performance indicator CS1, so the audit plan, when we saw the Q4 one at the last meeting, there wasn't a figure. And when this report came out initially, there wasn't a figure. But in discussions, we've obviously now got the figure for last year in terms of the performance against target, and we've got kind of, so where we're currently trending. I think the other point to highlight is there was a discussion around the food waste kind of collection targets. And actually out of that conversation, there was a discussion around that food waste wasn't showing on the report. That's now been added in. And so we can see on CS10 that there is a target for food waste collection as well, which I think is a good addition to the report. Those are my key kind of points, really. So anything else that you're happy to add in?
I can be really quick. I mean, in short, at this stage or at that stage of the year, all of the service priorities were showing as green on RAG status. So we delved a little bit into some of them, but there were no major alarm bells ringing on those. The risk factors had actually remained unchanged from the previous quarter. And the two biggest risks are medium-term financial strategy, as we've discussed before, and the waste collection, which was, waiting for some further information and funding, new burdens funding, which we haven't received. So the financing of our waste collection service, but that was unchanged. So that remains as was. Probably the one other thing specifically I'd add was on the KPI DM8, where last year, percentage of tree preservation work application decisions within the statutory determination period started quite poorly at the beginning of the year and improved, and it's just dipped a little bit into quarter 1. So we're just keeping an eye on that particular KPI to make sure, or try to make sure, that we can get that back on track throughout the remainder of the year. And other than that, I've nothing further to add. Councillor Drage.
It's not even a question. It's just kind of a point of order, really. Put some colour in there. It would be great to see, because all the RAG statuses, to Councillor Forster's point, it would be great to. The keys are fine, but if you and Kirsty could both do a similar style, so we can just see it all, rather than having to read it all, that would be fantastic. It's just a.
Ironically, Councillor Drage, they used to be colour coded, and people said just write the word because we printed in black and white.
Well,
so.
it's like one's doing one, one's doing the other. So you just pick one. That's what I'm saying, really.
Okay. I'll go to Councillor Fulton and Councillor Thomas.
Yeah, good practice is write red, amber, green and show the colour. And in this table, it shows the 3343, but it doesn't actually give you calculation that then says that's a 9 or a 12 or whatever. So please, can we have the same format across departments and include colours? I went through a couple at random because I got tired after reading 110 of the 114 pages. And one example, page 97, CS9. If you just have a look at it, target for the year is 250 per 100,000. And I add up the April, May, June, and that comes to 79, which means we're in excess of the 250 per 100,000. No comment, there's no reference. Is that to be expected in the first quarter? It's a random number, 79, but it's on track for over 300. So to me, that's a problem. Am I misreading it?
I thought that the trigger point where we have a problem, and we did hit this a few years ago on waste collection, was in that example on CS9, is if the target, if the number stated was equal to or exceeded 250. I think the point is that we're well under that, and therefore there are no red flags at the moment. Is that
that's correct? We are well under it, and those targets are embedded in the Serco contract, and so no, we are well within the figure at the moment.
Sorry, to clarify, if the figure is 250 as an annual target, and we're at 80 in a quarter of the year, that's tracking for 320. So is it an annual target or a quarterly target?
No, it's a quarterly target.
It doesn't say that.
No, fair enough. Point taken.
Yeah, I mean, that when taken, I think we can adjust that. We can change that. As I said, we were at a point a few years ago when we were well exceeding those numbers, and that was discussed at overview and scrutiny. But yes, if the reference isn't clear, it's difficult to understand the numbers. Do you want to ask a question, Councillor?
Yeah, it's more risk related. Would you be pleased to? It was just a couple on the medium-term finance strategy. It has, I think it was. It's just the previously reported it was major at 4, and now it's gone to critical at 4. I think major is 3 and critical is 4. So I wasn't sure if it should be major, critical, but it looked like there was a. I think major's 3, isn't it? Oh. So I wasn't sure if it was a move to major, to critical, or if it should be at major. But again, I just wondered. Don't want to answer now, but it's just.
No, it's a good spot, and it just hasn't been updated. It's critical, so it should be critical. The word major needs to be removed.
That's fine.
And replaced with critical.
And again, it's one obviously for the team to consider. With the cyber attack stuff, is it right that the impact is major, given what could happen? It feels like the impact could be critical, especially as it's described there around data loss, or we could be held to ransom, major financial impact. But again, they'll obviously have to kind of do that scoring, but it makes you wonder if there might be a case for it being a critical one in terms of potential impact. And then the last one, and then that's it, is on the failure to recruit or retain suitably skilled staff. So are we saying that's gone down? Essentially, so is it the mitigants kind of having the effect that actually that feels like lesser risk now? We're finding that we are retaining and recruiting better than we anticipated.
That is correct. Yeah, when we assessed it at previous quarter as 4 likely, that was anticipating the LGR effect of us losing people, and we haven't seen that come through yet. So we've re-established that, and there's a sort of separate note within the pack from our HR manager.
Thanks.
But yeah, noted on the other points. Thank you, and the risk register will be coming to the committee in probably 2 meetings time, so we can get into that in more detail. But thank you.
Okay, so last call for any remaining questions. No. Well, thank you very much, all those who fed back, to Kirsty and to Graham. So we move on to the work programmes, and we start with the Cabinet work programme. Any comments on the Cabinet work programme? Errors, things that are missing, things that aren't consistent? Councillor Forster.
Chair, at the last meeting, did we not query that there was one thing missing? I'm sorry, I seem to recall there was one thing that we queried wasn't on there, and I can't remember what it was. I do apologise. I wondered if you might.
Well, I'm going to be as helpful as you because I can't remember it either, I'm afraid. I'll check it outside the meeting if that's okay. Any other comments?
So, Chairman, just looking at the minutes from last meeting, it's for Cabinet. It says the committee considered Cabinet work programme, noting that fly tipping report considered at this meeting would be sent for Cabinet consideration. I think that is in there.
Okay. There you go. Someone was able to answer the question. I wasn't. Thank you, Mr. Clark. Any other comments on the Cabinet work programme? Councillor Smith.
Is there no October meeting for Cabinet? That's the case.
That I don't know. There wasn't a meeting. Was it last month? There wasn't a meeting, or this month?
Chairman, there is a scheduled meeting in October, but at the moment the work programme doesn't have any items identified for October.
Fair enough.
I lose track, Councillor Smith, about whether something is going to carry on or not. But anyway, okay. So if there's nothing further on Cabinet work programme, we'll move on to the overview and scrutiny work programme. Are we able to put up what we've left in front of people? For those who want to look at a screen, it is in front of you as well. So at least people who are watching this can see what we're talking about. And I'm not necessarily going to do this in order. I'm going to start on page 4 of the one in front of you. I haven't got a clue what page it is. Page 4, the last page of the pack. and the two items, I'll start with local government reorganisation. There have been some further discussions. We are awaiting the government publication, the structural order, is it?
So we're waiting the structural changes order from government, which will put the legislative framework around LGR in Hampshire.
Indeed so.
And that's likely to come, I don't know, sometime December, January.
Yeah, but in the meantime, there are scheduled informal joint committee meetings, which I think was mentioned earlier, involving the Councillor Radley, Councillor Neighbour and Councillor Crampton. The suggestion has been made that it will be informative for scrutiny, in fact for the council, for feedback to be received from those meetings, either in terms of a verbal update on what is happening and what it may mean, or in terms of the minutes, for example, of those meetings. The first meeting is going to be in September of this year, and I think they're going to be roughly every 2 months until such time as we move to the formal joint committee. So the suggestion is that we invite one of the three representatives from this council, in order, Councillor Neighbour, Councillor Radley and Councillor Crampton, as substitute to one of those three, depending on who attends the meeting and where it's relevant, to come to scrutiny. And we build this in on I guess it'd be on a 2-monthly basis, but the first one in October, just to provide some feedback to us and to provide an opportunity for us to ask some questions about what is going on around local government reorganisation, what's happening across those who are discussing such matters on the joint committee or the informal joint committee. So my suggestion is that we therefore start building that into the work programme starting in October, and it will probably start as a verbal update rather than a written, well, it won't be a verbal update rather than minutes of meetings.
Yes, Chairman. So these will be the voluntary meetings before the real ones come in, as you say. The item as described here isn't appropriate now. That was set up many months ago and put into the plan before we knew how LGR would be set out by government. So it refers to the implementation plan. The implementation plan is not a matter for this council to consider. It's actually the responsibility of the senior responsible officer, who is the Chief Executive of Hampshire County Council. So it's an officer piece of work that the Hampshire County Council's Chief Executive will coordinate. So it isn't something that we do, it's something they do. Now, so what the chairman's suggesting is that we don't, that we change that wording and have updates from the joint committees instead. And they will be considering elements of the implementation plan. So you sort of get to the same thing.
So it'd be an update from the informal joint committee by a Hart District Council representative on said committee.
Yeah.
And we'll change that wording. Councillor Jones.
Sorry, is that for us to comment on, or just for information?
It's for information, and I guess if there are things that are happening, we will have an ability as a committee to feed back to the representative, and they can take that away and do whatever. So yeah, there'll be an opportunity to feed back and to ask questions. So I think it would be valuable.
Okay, so it's not recommendations to cabinet or anything like that, which you would normally do. It's completely different. Okay.
This is a process. Sorry, my microphone's not straight. My batteries. So this isn't a Hart cabinet matter. This is the joint committee that will sort of precede the shadow council and do a lot of the preparatory work. And the reason why it will take sort of two forms, it will be voluntary to start with, pending the receipt of the structural changes order, and that will then make it formal joint committees after that. But nevertheless, the suggestion is that this committee might want to keep some oversight of what that committee is doing and what it's up to. So the formal reporting back from whoever the representative is from our councillor community, I think is the best way that this community can keep in touch with that. but there won't be any decisions, sort of cabinet decisions taking place there. It will be all preparing for the shadow council.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Brown.
Just in terms of those informal meetings, are they going to be recorded and minuted?
Yeah, can I just return them? They're voluntary but formal meetings. Yeah, you see what I mean? Yeah, and no, I think probably Chairman and I probably said informal at one point, but they're just going to be voluntary because they're not at that point required by the legislation. And then as soon as they are, the word voluntary drops off and they'll just become joint committees.
But I suppose the question being, there will be like recordings or minutes of those meetings in the public domain. Therefore, we're not going to potentially be stepping on stuff that might be considered confidential.
It depends. The normal rules will apply on confidentiality because at some point the joint committees will be talking about staffing and contracts, etc. So the same sort of rules around what is exempt and what isn't exempt will apply. But they will be formal meetings that are clerked and documented and minuted, etc. Yeah.
If we had to move into part 2 for any reason, I'm sure we could. But I think the advice I've received is initially we'll be okay. So is anyone unhappy that we move this onto the agenda moving forwards? Fine, good. That's one out of the way.
Chairman, can I just be clear for the minutes that that is to replace the item that's here? So
yes.
So okay. So the implementation plan reference will take off.
Yes, indeed.
And we'll just ask Kathy.
Local government reorganisation update.
Yeah,
is the simplest way to phrase it. Right, moving on to the second one that's highlighted yellow on the back page. The portfolio holder has suggested that at the end of September, when the call for sites is in, it's documented, it's released, and we move into consultation, that is the time for this committee, and in fact, all members of this council, to have an opportunity to hear what is going out and to scrutinise what is going out and ask questions. It's what Councillor Cockerell said at full council, and rather than in September, the time to do this will be October, because that will be the time that the consultation is out and in the public domain. So the suggestion, therefore, is that we bring this to overview and scrutiny. I'll expand on that in a second at the October meeting. Now, dependent on the format of that, of the information we're going to receive, and the fact, rather like when we discussed local government reorganisation, that may well be a broader overview and scrutiny chaired meeting, inviting all members of the council to come along and to ask questions, just as we did on the local government reorganisation. But nevertheless, I would like this to be moved into the work programme for the October meeting, if it is felt that we actually it's so big and there's so much to talk about that this needs to be a standalone item, rather like what we did for the local government reorganisation. We may have to come back and possibly arrange a standalone date, but for the time being, my suggestion is let's get it in the programme. We've got 2 months, and we can worry about that in September or through other communication, dependent on the format this is going to take. So any questions on that one, or are people happy for that to appear in the programme for October? So I'm going to cough. Any objections or questions?
Just on the timing, really, I mean, is that date then going to be after it's gone out to consultation, or is it before it goes out for consultation? Because we don't want to hold up the process, because that's the last thing we want to do is delay the local plan progress.
I believe, from Mr. Clark may correct me, I think we were told very clearly, or Councillor Cockerell said very clearly, he was not going to release details of sites and information until we publish. So it will be after it has been published. So we're not going to hold anything up. But it will be our opportunity to ask questions on what has gone out. and to understand where we are at that point in the process.
The Chairman, the portfolio holder will also update council at the end of September, but the wording again on this item is old wording. It was put in to put a marker down. The item will not be written like this. It will be as the Chairman has just described. So the Gateway 1 terminology will come out. That's just a process that has to be followed. It will be the briefing, all members invited to the ONS for a local plan briefing as suggested by the portfolio holder at council. And that's as the Chairman said. I think for now, schedule that in for your 13th of October meeting if the committee's happy to, and then you can always juggle with dates and times if there are other items that would make that meeting too unwieldy to do on one night.
Yeah, it was partly because of the past comments to Cabinet that I thought, well, hang on, does that mean that then that's going to delay it going out? So if
yes, this wording goes and the new wording will come in, which is about having that briefing.
So it's a briefing basically on what's gone out for consultation, right?
And our opportunity to ask questions on it, yes. Councillor Jones.
Sorry, thank you. Just for me. So that means the public will know and have seen their consultation before we get to see it. Is that what you're saying?
That is my understanding.
So it's possible that people could even have started responding to the consultation by the time we read it or see it.
I think one of the intentions of the portfolio holder was that Overview and Scrutiny Committee would actually act as a consultee in effect. So so as you work through and receive that briefing, then the comments will feed into the overall process.
Sorry, yes, I fully understand. That's great. Yeah, thank you.
I'm trying to act as the chairman. We have been asking about sight of this, and we were told no, it will have to be published. So this is our opportunity to scrutinise and pass comment. And as Mr. Clark chose words I maybe could have chosen to effectively act as a consultee. Yeah, available to scrutiny members, but we will also extend that to we will allow any member to come. As in fact, they can anyway, can't they? They can ask questions, but you know what I mean. So is everyone happy? Or more importantly, is anyone not happy that that goes on the agenda? If they're not happy, we'll have to have a vote on it. Right. Okay. The rest of the amber I'll move back actually to page 3. Kirsty is still here. 2 items have come through, one for November, one for December. One is to consider the action plan developed to consider the new MHCLG requirement, the published one in December 26th. It's the homelessness strategy action plan. And the proposal is to bring that through to overview and scrutiny in our November meeting. Anything you want to add on that, Kirsty?
No, I think that's pretty accurate. Just to say this is a new requirement that's recently come out of government that we need to submit an action plan to the ministry at some point in December. So if members would like to see it, there's an opportunity to do so in November.
Any questions on that item, or are people happy? Happy? Excellent.
So that's not going to Cabinet. That's not a linked Cabinet thing. That's
will that go to Cabinet, Kirsty, before or after us?
My understanding, I don't know, Graham, you may want to add to this, is that Cabinet will look at the overview and scrutiny work programme and decide whether or not they want to see these things coming forwards.
I think the homelessness action plan wouldn't necessarily go to Cabinet unless it had resource implication. But it's not one of the key strategy documents. It is an action plan, and I think Kirsty, you felt that Overview and Scrutiny Committee would probably benefit from seeing it on its way to finalisation. Is that right?
I think that's right. And we've had, at the last couple of service panels, we've had quite a debate about homelessness and the use of bed and breakfast and temporary accommodation. So we just thought it might be something that OV and Scrutiny would like to look at before we submit it.
Thank you. I think people said they were happy. Then another question came out. Are people still happy? Okay, fine. And then while you're on, Kirsty, the right sizing scheme brackets smart move update, that's proposed for December. Anything to comment on that one?
Just that this is a scheme that Cabinet approved beginning of the year, and the team have been busy mobilising. And when it was approved, we did say that we would do an update for members. So this one will be, it won't be a paper, but it will be a presentation on what the team have done so far with that funding and what sort of outcomes we're looking at.
Okay. Everyone happy with that one? Excellent. That just leaves, before we get comments on anything that might be missing, page 1. We've been developing, and again, I will come to Kirsty, a strategy, a Here for Heart strategy. And you've been working on this a while, Kirsty, and this is an opportunity for us to receive a presentation and to look at and possibly, well, note and possibly comment on the strategic direction of this initiative, a small part of which is obviously the Here for Heart funding, for which that will close off. So we might, I'm not expecting a full presentation on the Here for Heart funding, but given the closing date is soon, the initiative, we might get an update on the level of interest, at least on that funding, if not any other decisions. Have you anything more to say on that Here for Heart thing?
Just to remind members that one of the real positives that came out of the peer challenge was the Here for Heart, recognition of the Here for Heart initiative. And so we took it upon ourselves to make sure that it was fully developed, ready for LGR. So the team have been looking at the strategic direction, pulled together a bit of a plan over what they want to do over the next 18 months, 2 years. And so there is an opportunity for members to review this work, have a presentation on Here for Heart, to fully understand what the beast is and what it delivers. The only issue with the September date is I'm on holiday. Unfortunately, I'll be enjoying some Cornish sunshine, and Nikki Jenkins is also away. But one of our Here for Heart leads in the team is very happy to bring that presentation forward to OV and Scrutiny if you'd like to see that.
Okay. Any comments on that one, or are people happy? Okay. Thank you. And then the final one that's highlighted yellow, I think I've got all of them. Given we didn't want the Here for Heart just to stand on its own at that meeting, and also because October was starting to look quite busy with local government reorganisation and local plan, we've suggesting that we bring forward the date of the corporate risk register from October to September, which will alleviate things a little bit in October. Any objections to that? No. Any other comments on the programme? No, apart from the comment that was made earlier that some of the things that are coming in will make sure that they tie in with the Cabinet work programme in both directions. So, thank you. Any further comments on the programme? No. In which case, declare the meeting closed. Thank you, everyone.